सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम्। यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तन्न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः। We are in the end of the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Swami Viditatmananda discussed the verse 41 of this chapter. So let us read that verse 41. Yoga sanyasta karmanam jnana sanchinna samshayam atmavantanna karmani nibadhanti dhananjaya. Atmavantam na karmane nibadhanti dhananjaya. He Dhananjaya, Atmavantam karmani na nibadhanti. Karmani na nibadhanti. Karmani actions na nibadhanti do not bind. Atmavantam, one who is possessed of Atma. Here it means one who enjoys the alertness of the mind. And the further qualifications of this one, whom the karma do not bind, is jnana sanchinna samshayam. Sanchinna samshayam. One whose samshaya, or doubts have been sanchinna, cut asunder by knowledge. So by knowledge, doubts have been cut asunder. And further, yoga sanyasta karmanam. Sannyasta karmanam, one is renounce the actions by yoga. So what's the meaning of the word yoga here? Both the kinds of yoga have been discussed here in the previous two chapters, in second chapter, third chapter. One meaning of the word yoga is karma yoga. Other meaning is sankhya yoga. Lokesmin dvidha nishtha puraprokta mayanagha jnana yogena sankhyanam karma yogena yoginam jnana yoga and karma yoga or sankhya yoga and karma yoga. Yoga sannyasta karmanam. One who has renounced actions by virtue of yoga. So, but yoga can be understood here in both the main sciences. Yoga can mean karma yoga. It also can mean jnana yoga. Although the nature of sannyasa or renunciation is different in each case. Yoga sannyasta karmanam, one is renounce karma or actions by virtue of yoga. If then the word yoga means karma yoga, then you know very well that, and we'll discuss it in the fifth chapter also, when actions are performed with the attitude of yoga, which is Ishvararma Buddhi, performing an action as an offering to Ishvara, performing actions as a contributor, or performing selfless actions, brings about antahkarana shuddhi, purification of mind, which is what prepares a person for sannyasa. It is called vividisha sannyasa. Vividisha, veditum ichcha, the desire for knowledge. So the point is, when one gains antahkarana shuddhi or purity of mind, which means that when the mind becomes predominantly sattvic, then there arises love for knowledge. There arises vividisha, desire to gain knowledge. Tametam vedanavachanena brahmanaha vividishanti yajnena danena tapasa anashakena. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says that the brahmanaha, the vivekinaha, the discriminating people, those who can discriminate between shreyas and preyas, those who understand what brings about a long-term good as against short-term good. Prayas can be simply described as short-term good, short-term happiness, immediate gratification, which brings about long-term pain, dependence, bondage. Shreyas, on the other hand, can be understood as short-term pain, which brings about long-term happiness. In the 18th chapter, Lord Krishna says, Yatadagre vishamiva pariname amritopamam tassukam satvikam proktam atmabuddhi prasadayam. Yatadagre vishamiva, that it feels like visham, like bitter, like painful agre in the beginning. Pariname amritopamam, but which results into amritam, ambrosia, sweetness, happiness. So that which feels painful in the beginning, that pain is the pain arising from having to give up the attachments and aversions. I am committed to, or I am identified with my raga dveshas, attachments and aversions. Atma buddhi prasadayam. For gaining happiness that comes from the Atma Buddhi Prasad, the clarity of mind, purity of mind, it is necessary to give up raga dvesha, attachments and aversions. And that one feels painful in doing that. Because so far one sees a value of fulfilling raga dveshas, fulfilling attachments and aversions. That's the only way I know how to be happy. And now I am taught the raga dvesha, are enemies. Tayor namashamagachet tau hyasya paripanthinau. Do not come under the sway of raga dveshas. They are the enemies on your path. So then when I take up to a life of karma yoga, which requires me to perform actions not as prompted by raga dveshas, as prompted by Ishvararma buddhi, worship, offering to the Lord. It feels painful in the beginning, but ultimately as I gain clarity of mind, I discover inner happiness. Happiness that on its own wells up from within. Happiness always wells up from within. Even when we feel that the happiness is coming from an object which is very dear to me, it is not an object or thing that gives me happiness. The object or thing or situation or an event becomes merely a nimitta, an occasion to bring about an experience of happiness welling from within. So happiness always wells up from within. Even when I think that something else has given me happiness, it does not. It always comes from within, because that's where the happiness is. The self is happiness. So as the mind becomes sattvic, becomes clear, but obstructing the manifestation of happiness, the raga dveshas, as they slowly go away, happiness on its own becomes manifest. Ultimately, one discovers happiness as one's nature. That's a long-term happiness. That's one path. Path of yoga, path of Shreyas. Vishendriya Sanyogad Yattadagre Amritopavam Pariname Vishamiva Tatsukham Rajasam Smritam. That is a path of bhoga, which means self-gratification, gratification of sense organs, gratification of ego, which comes from the objects of pleasure, which comes from the achievement of the ego, etc. Vishendriya Sanyogat Yattadagre Amritopamam. When my sense organs of the mind contact something that is pleasurable, then it gives me happiness, which is immediate gratification, short-term happiness. Pariname Vishamiva. Lord Krishna says that happiness ultimately turns into Visham, into poison. Because I become more and more dependent upon the source of happiness, which is other than me. I will become addicted to those things, become helpless. And the sense of helplessness keeps on growing, the bondage is growing. So, yoga sanyasta karmanam. Yoga is a karma yoga, a life dedicated to, or a life conducive to letting go of ragadveshas. Then one discovers in sattvic mind, in course of time, one discovers vividisha. I quoted a passage from the Bhrudaranyaka Upanishad. Tametam vedānuvachanena brahmanaha vividishanti yajnena dhanena tapasa anashakena. The brahmanas, the vivekinaha, the discriminating people, vividishanti. You want to discover the desire for knowledge. Those who discover the value for knowledge, and therefore those who desire to discover from within a desire for knowledge. Vedanuvachanena, the recital of Vedas, yajnena, yajna, dana, tapaha. So these are the duties prescribed by the scriptures, and they perform these actions, these duties, for the purpose of discovering the desire for knowledge. Once desire for knowledge arises, then rest of things will happen. Most important is a keen desire for knowledge. Then other things will become secondary. Then as we saw in the 4th chapter itself, tad viddhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshante jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Tad viddhi. Here Arjuna, may you know the method by which you gain the knowledge. Pranipatena, by long prostration to the teachers. Sevaya, by serving them. Winning over them. By your sincerity, by your devotion, by your shraddha, trust. Pariprashnena. When you find them pleased with you, then ask the question. Prasannam tanuprapya pruchye jnatavyam atmanaha. Seek the knowledge of the self from them. So the way the process of gaining knowledge is described in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishad and the scriptures is that one should listen to these scriptures, Shravanam, the unfoldment of these passages or statements of the Upanishads at the feet of the teacher. So this knowledge will be gained from the teacher. Shravanam, listening to teacher is considered the most important thing because Shravanam gives rise to aparoksha jnanam, to the immediate knowledge. What is meant by Shravanam is Atma Vichara. It's not just listening that gives rise to knowledge. It is Vichara. Deliberation upon the nature of what is the nature of self, what is the nature of Atma, what's the nature of Brahman, what's the nature of reality, what's the nature of world, what's the nature of Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara. A deliberation upon this, which is the subject matter of Upanishads. Upanishads devote themselves to unfolding the nature of Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara, the individual, the universe, Ishvara, the Lord, and reveal the oneness of all the three, oneness of everything. Sadeva Swami Idamagrasit Ekameva Dvitiyam. What is this Sat? Existence, Brahman, one without a second. So this is what the teacher unfolds. And one should expose oneself to this teaching from a competent teacher. In those days, this required that I should leave my home. Because teachers usually were in remote places like forests, like river banks, like mountain caves. And when you trek all the way there, which means that one has to leave home, this setup called home or family. Must give the comfort and security and the warmth that comes from the setup of family. And when that is given up, one also gives up the responsibilities towards family. It's called karma sannyasa. Renunciation of karma, renunciation of all the duties. What is meant by duty? Something that I must do is called kartavya. Thus, everybody has this sense of responsibility that I must perform my duty. If I fail to perform the duty, there is a sense of guilt. Also it is said that if you fail to perform, if you don't perform your duty, you incur sin. So duty is called kartavya, something that has to be done. I'm duty bound, they say. So in a way, duty represents a bondage, which is meant to help us get released from bondage, but it's a bondage nevertheless. So that bondage has to be given up in order that one can dedicate oneself to the pursuit of knowledge at the feet of the teacher. Therefore, going to the teacher, living with the teacher, pursuing knowledge through Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam, presupposes the renunciation of all the duties. It's called karma sannyasa. In fact, it is kartavya sannyasa. Renunciation of all kartavya, of all duties. A person renounces all the duties and also renounces all the claims. I have no duty towards anybody, nor do I have any claim from anybody. This gives a freedom to the mind, a leisure of the mind, where the mind is no more bothered. I have to do this, I have to do that. This kartavya duty always puts a pressure on us. This has to be done, this has to be done, this has to be done. As long as that kind of pressure is there, the mind is not free, it doesn't enjoy the leisure to devote itself to the pursuit of knowledge, Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. Therefore, this karma sannyasa, kartavya sannyasa, gives this aspirant a leisure of the mind. It enables him to devote himself to what is required for pursuit of knowledge. That would involve serving the teacher, that's living with the teacher, serving the teacher may be part of it, but not the duties that were demanded of him by his being a part of a family setup. So this kind of sannyasa, which is a deliberate action, he deliberately announces that I have no more any duties, I have no more any claims. He grants immunity from fear to all the creatures. This is called Vaida sannyasa. Vaida sannyasa means sannyasa, renunciation of karma, taken by vidhi. There is a samskara, the process that one goes through, a rite of passage that one goes through for taking sannyasa of that kind. It's called Vividisha sannyasa. Sannyasa taken for the purpose of Vividisha, for the purpose of pursuing the knowledge. So, coming back to verse 41, Yoga Sannyasta Karmanam. One who has renounced the karma of the duties by virtue of yoga. Where if yoga means karma yoga, then as we said, karma yoga in course of time brings about antahkarana shuddhi, purification of mind, freedom from the inner pressures of raga, dvesha, attachments and aversions, an inner leisure, a discovery of the desire for knowledge, vividisha, and that enables one to become a vividisha sannyasi, a renunciate who has assumed this life for the purpose of pursuing the knowledge. So, yoga sannyasta karmanam. One meaning of the word yoga is karma yoga, by virtue of which one has sannyasta karmanam, renounce all the karma, renounce all the duties for the pursuit of knowledge. Jnana sanchinna samshayam. And one pursues the knowledge, by virtue of all samshaya, the doubts are eliminated. Because earlier verse said, samshayatma vinashyati. The person whose nature it is to doubt everything, he in fact invites distraction. Agnyascha shraddadhanasya samshayatma vinashyati. Agnya, an ignorant one. Ashraddadhana, one doesn't have shraddha or trust in the scriptures, trust in the teacher, trust in Ishvara. Samshayatma, and further one who doubts everything. Each one of them vinashyati, each one of them invites distraction, spiritual distraction. It is explained that merely the ignorant person who has shraddha, who does not doubt, he can be easily cured. The Ayurvedic physicians talk of chikitsa, the treatment or the cure of a disease. So ignorance, of course, a disease with which everyone is born. But if one has shraddha, a trust or faith in the words of teacher, in the scriptures, in Ishvara, in the parampara, then he can be easily cured. He goes to teacher, subjects himself to the teaching, and his ignorance is removed because he has shraddha. So that chikitsa is simple, sushtu. If one is ignorant that everybody is, and one doesn't have shraddha, doesn't trust, does not trust the teacher, does not trust the scriptures, does not trust Ishvara, but it is free from doubt, meaning that that person is willing to listen to you. He is amenable to reasoning. The distrust can be removed by proper reasoning. The person does not trust the teachers. Doesn't have shraddha or trust in Ishvara, doesn't have shraddha in scripture, doesn't have shraddha in Guru. But otherwise open-minded. Otherwise available to listening. In proper reasoning we can convince him. Because of a certain process of reasoning, he has arrived at conclusion people are not trustworthy, Ishvara is not trustworthy, Guru is not trustworthy. By his own kind of reasoning he has arrived at this conclusion. We can provide a proper reasoning and make him see that his conclusions are wrong. Therefore, yatna sadhya. The one who is ignorant and also devoid of shraddha is yatna sadhya, can be cured with yatna, with effort. The person is doubting, he cannot be cured at all because he will not trust even the person who wants to cure him. You go to a physician and don't trust the physician, I don't know, can I trust you? Doesn't trust that the physician, his intentions are genuine. He understands what the disease is. He understands what the treatment is. You don't trust. Then you will not even follow the chikitsa, will not follow the treatment. So this doubt, samshaya, is the greatest obstacle. Ignorance, of course, is obstacle to knowledge, which can be removed by the teaching. The lack of shraddha also is the further obstacle, which can be dealt with by proper reasoning and then teaching. But the samshaya, the doubt, can only go by knowledge. So if one follows the tradition, performs one's duties, then Antahkarana Shuddhi can take place. Then one goes to the teacher. Jnana Sanchinna Samshayam. This Jnanam, knowledge, also has two stages. First stage is Paroksha Jnanam. Second stage is Aparoksha Jnanam. Paroksha Jnanam, indirect knowledge, intellectual knowledge, and intellectual understanding. The intellectual understanding will remove all the doubts and create the conviction. So the intellectual understanding that what Vedanta says makes sense to me. That yes, that I am Brahman is definitely makes sense to me. I have to be Brahman. So first that conviction arises as a result of exposing oneself to teaching called Paroksha Jnanam. It has not yet become my experience, if that's the word you want to use. But it does still become the conviction in the intellect. And that conviction removes all the doubts. Jnana Sanchinna Samshayam. So Karma Yoga leads to Vividisha Sannyasa. Vividisha Sannyasa leads one to the teacher. One exposes oneself to teaching and gains a Paroksha Jnana to begin with, an intellectual conviction which removes the doubts. And the process then further continues, Shravanam, Manam, Nididhyasanam. It leads to Aparoksha Jnanam, immediate knowledge. Aparokshanubhuti, Aparoksha Jnanam, immediate knowledge. Meaning that I am Brahman becomes a living reality for me. I see the fact that I am Brahman. That is called Vidvatta, that's called the knowledge. And that also leads to sannyasa. That's called Vidvat Sannyasa. What is that knowledge? Lord Krishna described that in the verse 18 of this chapter, 4th chapter. Karmani akarmayah pashyed akarmani cha karmayah. Yah pashyed, one who sees. Karmani akarmayah pashyed. In karma, in action, one sees the actionless. That is, when the action is performed, is being performed, one sees oneself actionless self. One sees the fact that I, the self, does not perform action. Action simply takes place in my presence. This action enables one to see the actionless self. That action is performed at the level of the body, mind, sense complex in the presence of I, who is consciousness. When the viveka takes place between self and non-self, that karma or action takes place at the level of the mind, intellect, sense organs, body. Who am I? I am the very witness. Not in witness, just a consciousness. The 5th chapter will clarify that further. Then becoming free from kartrutva, a sense of doership. Lord Krishna described that in the 4th chapter very elaborately. Yasya sarve samarambaha kama sankalpa varjitaha Jnanangidakta karmanam tamahu panditam buddhaha. Jnanagni dagdha karmanam, whose karma or kartritva, sense of doership, is burned in the fire of knowledge. So we saw all those verses. Karmanya vipravuttopi naiva kinchit karoti saha. Even though he is very well engaged in performance of action, to us he looks like he is very thoroughly performing the action. Neva kinchit karoti sa, he does not do anything. From his standpoint, he does not do anything. That's a real sannyasa. It's called a vidvat sannyasa. Sannyasa by virtue of knowledge. Because Atma is sannyasi. Who is the sannyasi? One who does not perform actions. Now the first level of that sannyasi, the renunciate, is one who does not perform action by deliberation. I will not perform action because I have other things to do. I want to pursue knowledge. Ultimately, it culminates in knowledge that I do not perform action anyway. First, I do not want to perform action, I will not perform action. Then I realize I don't perform action. Discovery of the actionless self. That's called vidvat sannyasa. Renunciation by virtue of vidvata, by virtue of knowledge. And that is the real sannyasa which Lord Krishna is teaching in the Bhagavad Gita. So these two levels of sannyasa are there. What is called Vaidha sannyasa. Vaidha means that which is taken by vidhi, with help of a ritual, which is a deliberate action of taking sannyasa, called Vividisha sannyasa also. And the second level of sannyasa is the Vidvat sannyasa, renunciation by virtue of knowledge that I am renunciate always. Akarta aham, I am actionless. In that case, the first line will read like Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam. By that word yoga means Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge. What's the knowledge? Akarta aham, I am the actionless self. Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam, by virtue of that knowledge, yoga or knowledge, Sanyasta Karmanam, by Aparoksha Jnanam, one has become the renunciate in the primary sense. So Jnana Sanchinna Samshayam. By Paroksha Jnanam, the indirect knowledge, intellectual conviction, all the samshayas, all doubts are gone. This samshaya is the great obstacle to knowledge. When Paroksha Jnana removes that samshaya, then the further process of Shravanam, Mananam leads to Aparoksha Jnanam. And that may remove the remaining samshaya if there is any. Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam, Jnana Sanchinna Samsayam, Atmavantam. Atmavantam, possessed of Atma, where here the word Atma is explained as Manaha, the mind, possessed of mind, meaning that one who has total control over the mind, who has the mastery over the mind. Apramattam, Bhashyakara explains, free from pramada, free from inadvertence, free from distraction. What's the distraction? Distraction is the mind running away from the self. If the mind has any attraction towards any sense pleasure, any need for gratification, the mind will run towards that object from which it expects gratification, and it just deviated from the self. Atmantam, one is alert. Apramattam, apramattas tada bhavati. Even Kathopanishad says that when this, all the obstacles, when the mind has become completely quiet, silent, one becomes alert, one becomes vigilant. That mind is ready to see the nature of the self. Atmantam, who is apramattam, who is alert, who is not distracted, centered upon the self. So this wise person who has a knowledge, as well as centered, meaning one who has nishtha, the abidance in the knowledge. So this sannyasi, in the true meaning of the word sannyasa, all whose doubts are removed by virtue of knowledge, who has gained an abidance in knowledge. What's the knowledge? Actionless I am. Lord Krishna says, Nadibadnan karmani nadibadnanti dhananjaya. To this person, the wise person, he Dhananjaya, karmani nadibadnanti. Actions do not bind him. Now this is important for Arjuna to know. His reluctance to perform the action was because of a understanding that action binds. If I perform the act of fighting this battle, I'll become the killer of the enemies. I'll become Hanta, means the killer. Hanta ched manyate handum, matas ched manyate hadam. One who thinks that I am killing, other one who thinks that I am being killed. Ubhautavana vijanathat nayam hantyana. In fact, both of them do not know, because Atma neither kills nor is killed. It's the true nature of the self. So because of ignorance, Arjuna thought that I would be the killer and this action binds me. All along, Lord Krishna is trying to teach Arjuna. It is not the action that binds you. First it is said, it is the attachment to the results of the action. Karmanyevadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Your freedom is in performance of action, not in determining the outcome. Ma karma phala hetur bhuhu. Therefore, do not become the author of karma phala. Remain the author of karma. So Lord Krishna wants to teach is not the karma that binds. First level of bondage is the attachment to the karma phala. And then a subtler aspect that binds is kartrutvam, the sense of doership, that I am performing the action. So yoga sanyastha karmanam. First level is karma yoga, where you give the attachment to the karma phala. Yoga sanyastha karmanam. Second is the knowledge, where you discover that I am the actionless self. Atmantam, then karmani nadibad. Hey Arjuna, karma does not bind. Actions do not bind. Actions never bind. It is the attachment to karma phala. And a subtler level of bondage is the notion that I am the doer, kartrutva. That is what binds a person. Not karma. Meaning that if you know this, Arjuna, that your actionless self, evam jnatva krutam karma purva mokshavihi. In this chapter, Lord Krishna said earlier, knowing this, the mumukshu in the past also performed the karma. Knowing that karma does not bind. It is important for Arjuna to know that karma does not bind. This conclusion or notion that karma binds is an obstacle to Arjuna in performing his duty, because I'll be bound. Lord Krishna says, no. When you perform karma with the right attitude, with the right understanding of yourself, karmane nanibadnanti, actions do not bind. So thus, in answer to Arjuna's question as to why do you want me to perform this karma, tatkim karmane ghore mam niyojayasi Keshava, why you engage me in this terrible action? Lord, action is not terrible. Action does not bind. It is ignorance. It brings about kartrutva, sense of doership. Brings about karma phala sakti, attachment to karma. All of this is what binds. So Lord Krishna describes the process of becoming free from bondage of karma. Therefore, now the verse 42, the last verse of this chapter, says here, Tasmad ajnana sambhutam Kristham jnana sinatmanah Chitvainam samshayam yogam Atishthotishta bharata. Tasmad, therefore. What is therefore? What was said in the last verse? Na karmane nibadnanti dhananjaya. Hey Dhananjaya, one in whom all the doubts are removed by virtue of the knowledge of self, one has become free from sense of doership, and thus one has become completely free from the karma, the bondage of karma, so the bondage that was thought to be done by karma. Karma do not bind. That being the case, Arjuna, karma does not bind. Meaning that if you perform your duty, it is not that the duty binds you. This the Lord Krishna explained with reasoning. Tasmad, therefore. Now that conviction that I should perform karma should arise in Arjuna. Lord Krishna has provided all the reasons, and particularly in the verse that we just saw, yoga sanyasta karmanam jnana sanchinna samshayam atmantam na karmani nibadnanti dhananjaya. When jnana sanchinna samshayam, the samshaya, the doubts can be removed by jnanam, by knowledge. Yoga sanyasta karmanam, the knowledge can come when you renounce the action, duty. Yoga sanyasta karmanam, and the renunciation of duty happens by yoga or karma yoga. So Lord Krishna has described the process here. The first step is karma yoga. The result is antahkarana shuddhi, purification of mind, which brings about vividisha, desire for knowledge, which then results into karma sannyasa or vividisha sannyasa, the life of renunciation taken up for vividisha, for pursuit of knowledge, which brings about knowledge or aparoksha jnanam, all the doubts are removed, aparoksha jnanam, actionless self I am, which makes one free from all actions, from everything. Because he is so therefore, tasmat, therefore, if this is all clear to you, Arjuna, tasmat ajnana sambhutam hrustam hutstam jnanasyanatma chitvainam samshayam yogam enam samshayam. Enam samshayam, this doubt. What is the doubt? That can karma lead me to moksha, which is the goal? Jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tatkim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. This was the question asked by Arjuna in the beginning of the 3rd chapter. When Arjuna listened to Lord Krishna's discourse describing and extolling Sthita Prajna, man of abiding wisdom, how he is free. There is a description of a sannyasi, of a renunciate, of a free person. So Arjuna could see there that Lord Krishna is praising sannyasa. A wise person is a sannyasi, a vidvat sannyasi, a renunciate by virtue of knowledge. So Jayati said, Karmanaste mata buddhir janardana. Hey Janardana, according to what you just described, the buddhi or the wisdom or the knowledge is superior to karma. Tatkim karmane ghore maam niyojayasi he Keshava. Then why do you impel me to perform this action which involves a lot of violence? Ghora karma. So this doubt is there in mind of Arjuna. That karma seems to be binding, therefore it only can bring about bondage and knowledge alone can liberate me. So Lord Krishna clarified here that karma in fact is a means of ultimately discovering freedom. If that karma is performed with the attitude of yoga, and we will continue to discuss that in the 5th chapter also. So this doubt, whether should I perform karma or should I pursue knowledge? And there that doubt is there, one cannot do anything. Sometimes karma, no. Knowledge, no. Karma, no. Therefore Lord Krishna has now clearly explained to you how karma yoga leads to knowledge that destroys your doubt, destroys your ignorance. It makes you free. Tasmat, therefore, samshayam, this doubt, hrutstam samshayam, the doubt that is in your heart, that is in your mind or in your intellect, which doubt arises on account of a certain way of thinking, understand? The people who doubt something also have a way of coming to that conclusion. It is not trustworthy. They do not trust, cannot trust. By virtue of some kind of reasoning which is based on their experiences or their own thinking. Therefore, hey Arjuna, this doubt which is in your mind, Kristam, this doubt that is in your mind, heart or mind here, Chitva, cut asunder the doubt. How? Jnanasena. Asi means a sword. Jnanasena, by the sword in the form of knowledge. Jnanasena enam samshayam, enam Hrustham samshayam chitva. Cutting asunder this doubt which is in your heart by the sword of knowledge. The first is of paroksha jnanam, the indirect knowledge, the conviction that arises in the intellect to begin with, and that results into conviction as such. The paroksha jnanam, there is also conviction. The conviction which is there to begin with in the intellect results into conviction of the nature of immediate knowledge. Both are nishchaya only. Jnanasyana, by the sword of knowledge, cutting asunder the doubt which is lodged in, which is in your heart. Ajnana sambhutam samshayam. For samshaya, the doubt, Lord Krishna has his two adjectives. Hrustham, the doubt is in your heart. Ajnana sambhutam. Ajnanat sambhutam, which is very well created from ignorance. Sambhutam, born of ignorance. So this doubt which is born of ignorance, which leads to aviveka, non-discrimination, and the wrong way of thinking. As I said, the doubt also is the result of some process of thinking. I'm not saying one should never have any doubt. When the doubt is with reference to Ishvara, with reference to scriptures, with reference to teacher, with reference to teaching, to the tradition, that destroys this person. That doubt destroys the person because it closes a doorway, very gateway for one's freedom. Therefore, that doubt must be destroyed. The doubts which we may have with reference to worldly things are okay, are a different matter. At the most, they may deprive us of some worldly pleasures. But this doubt, the spiritual doubt, closes the gate for us to do what is necessary for our own happiness, our own freedom. So this doubt must go. Chitva, may you cut asunder the doubt which is in your heart. So, Atmanaha samshayam. The doubt Atmana of the self. So, Bhashyakara discusses his word here, Atmana. The doubt of the self and doubt about the self. Atma becomes both the ashraya and vishaya of the samshaya in technical words. Atma is the ashraya of samshaya, means the one who has doubt is Atma, you. Atma is vishaya of the samshaya, your doubt about the self. So you who has a doubt about the self, that doubt or the samshaya must be, distrust must be cut asunder. Whether knowledge or karma. Understand the process as we explained. How karma is a means for knowledge and knowledge is a means of moksha. By that conviction, may you remove the doubt as to what you have to do right now. Right now, you have to perform the action to qualify for knowledge, which will help you to gain the knowledge and become free. Chitvenam samshayam yogam atishtha uttishta yogam atishtha. So may you take up to yoga, karma yoga. Arjuna, may you take up to the life of karma yoga. Performing your duty, doing what is right in a given situation. What is right in this situation, Arjuna? Uttishta Bharata. He Bharata. He Bharata Vamshodbhava. O descendant of Bharata. Bharata is known as possessed of valor, fearlessness. So you are the descendant of Bharata. Hey Bharata, Uttishta, arise. Why does Lord say Uttishta? Because in the last verse of the first chapter, it was described how Chitvayanam, so how Arjuna discarded his bow and arrow and sat down in the middle of his chariot. Rathopastha upavishad visrujya sasharam chapam shoka samvigna manasa. Rathopastha upavishad. Arjuna sat down. He could not even stand. His mind filled with grief. Having let go or given up his bow and arrow. So Arjuna is sitting with bow and arrow given up. That Lord says, arise, take up your weapons and do your duty. So this fourth chapter concludes with thus an adesha or instruction or a command to Arjuna, a vidhi, uttishta bharata, yudhyasva bharata, yogam atishta, you take up to yoga karma yoga, for that arise and perform your duty. That's how the fourth chapter concludes. And let us read the Sankalpa Vakya here. Om Tatsat Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yogo Nama Chaturtho Dhyaya. It in this manner Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So in the Bhagavad Gita, which is sung by Lord Krishna, Brahma Vidyaya, with the main subject matter is Brahma Vidya, the knowledge of Brahman, knowledge of self. Yoga Shastra, and then the other secondary subject matter is Yoga, the Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga. Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade, which is the form of Samvada, a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yogo Nama Chaturthodhyaya, the fourth chapter of it, the subject matter is Jnana Karma Sannyasa. Sannyasa, renunciation. Karma Sannyasa, renunciation of karma or duty. Jnana by virtue of knowledge. Karma Sannyasa by virtue of knowledge is the, what is the knowledge? Karmani akarmayah pashed, knowledge of the actionless self. By virtue of that knowledge, the renunciation that takes place by itself, meaning there is no action of renunciation here. When one takes that vividisha sannyasa, then one this a deliberate action that now I renounce. In the wake of knowledge that I am actionless self, renunciate, the renunciation is by virtue of knowledge. Something that takes place on its own, something which is there. So there is no action involved in the vidvat sannyasa. So by default they say, by meaning that knowledge is renunciation. Because self is renunciate. So jnana karma sannyasa, renunciation of karma by knowledge of self. That is the subject matter of the 4th chapter. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarva papebhyah mokshayishyami ma shuchah. Hari Om. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Vadarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmedi Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.